is Amber. Welcome to a Lovely Yarn podcast. This is episode 16. It's only been 1 week since I filmed my last podcast. And the only reason I mention that is because this is the first time that's ever happened. Usually there are much longer gaps in between my podcasts. But I have had so many new cast-ons and so many new projects that I felt it warranted another episode. I want to pardon any noise you hear in the background. My kids are out. It's still early morning. My kids are out emptying the dishwasher. We live in a very tiny house. Anybody else live in a small house? So basically, you can hear everything. So hopefully you're not hearing that. I know last week my dog was whining outside my door. Just want to mention that. I apologize. But really, it's just part of living in a small house. And the bedrooms are right off the main living area. So it can be a problem. Not really a problem. It's just part of living in a little house. I know last night my daughter and I were trying to go to sleep. It was like 11 o'clock at night and my son and husband were out talking in the living room and we were both having a hard time falling asleep. So how many of you live in a small house? Do you guys have a problem like that? I used to want a bigger house. Now I appreciate it because it's less to clean. Because I like things clean, but I don't really like cleaning. So having a smaller house is less cleaning. But let's talk about knitting because that's what this podcast is about. Knitting and spinning and basically fiber related things. It is cold here, guys. For anyone that doesn't know, we live in Western Pennsylvania. We have a very small hobby farm. With some goats and rabbits and chickens and cats and dogs. We used to have alpacas, but we rehomed those. So if I feel like our little homestead keeps getting smaller and smaller, but we were supposed to get this huge winter storm over the weekend and we didn't really get what they were calling for, but we got ice and then more snow on top and it's been freezing. I think it was -2 this morning, Fahrenheit. I don't know what the wind chill was. I know that my little thermometer outside said -2. So that is cold. That is too cold for me. I am definitely a spring and summer girl. I'm not crazy about winter. And so, yeah, I'm ready to move to the south. I get like that every single winter. Pennsylvania's beautiful. The summers here are nice. But, yeah, I just like to be hot. I like to be hot. I'd rather be hot than cold. But anyway, let's get on to the knitting. And I don't know what's happened to me because typically I just like to work on 1 or 2 projects at a time, but I have had so many cast-ons lately. And granted, they are smaller projects, so they're not like it's not like I'm knitting multiple sweaters at one time. That would be overwhelming to me. But I thought I'm going to share. I'm going to get on now because if I wait 3 weeks, I might have way more than what I want to talk about. So I want to show you, I have 2 finished objects, and one of these I shared on last week's podcast. The Hermione's Everyday Socks. I finished these up. This is in the Retrosaria Mondim yarn, and it's the Apple Crumb colorway. So they are done. I'm not going to say a whole lot about them because I talked about them in detail last week as far as the pattern and the yarn and all that. I will say that I've never used this yarn before, and it is 100%, it's a natural sock yarn, so it has no nylon in it. It's just wool. And I did have a viewer comment that her socks that she made out of this yarn, it did not last long. They wore through pretty fast. That's disappointing. That was disappointing to hear. And I also said my last podcast that I am new to knitting socks with natural yarn, with just wool yarn. This is only the 3rd pair that I've knitted in just natural. I shared last week about my Woolly Mammoth Fiber Co. yarn, the natural sock yarn I bought. And I knitted the fur socks out of that. I've only worn those socks 1 time, but I'm already noticing a little bit of peeling. So I think I'm just going to have to be careful about wearing those socks. Maybe I'm not going to be able to wear them. Maybe I need to wear them more. I don't know. I'm just going to see. I guess I'm just gonna have to wait and see. But yeah, so Bex had said that hers unfortunately had worn out, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. But they are pretty. I like the yarn. I like the feel of the yarn, and this is my favorite sock pattern as far as a textured sock pattern. So I enjoyed making them, and they're done. Okay, the next finished object I have, and it's my only other finished object, are a pair of slippers. And these are the Mine slippers. And I'll link the designer and the pattern on Ravelry down below. They're made out of a bulky yarn. So they're so funny looking when you look at them from the side. Look at them. They look like kids' slippers. And I'm going to insert a picture because I took a picture of me wearing them. So I think it's easier to get, it's easier to see the patterning and what the slipper actually looks like when they're actually on feet rather than just looking at them like this. Because this is, yeah, it kind of looks silly. So I'll insert a picture here. Okay, so this pattern calls for a bulky weight yarn, and I did have some Lion brand Thick and Quick. I actually have quite a bit of that yarn. I don't really use it anymore. When I used to knit and crochet items to sell, I used that yarn a lot because it was more affordable. It still had some wool in it, and it was a wool that was, it was super wash. So when my customers would buy things, they could throw it in the wash and dryer, and wasn't a big deal. But I don't use that much anymore. So my first thought was I'm going to use a skein of that. But then so I thought I have this Handspun that I dyed with natural dyes. Now this Handspun, I'm going to show you the two skeins I used for my slippers. This is not my Handspun. I have told this story before. A neighbor friend, she was cleaning out someone's house that had passed away, and the family was going to throw this huge box of hand-spun yarn from this woman's sheep. This elderly woman used to have sheep. She used to spin. So I don't even know. I haven't counted the skeins, but there were probably 30 skeins, and it was just a natural off-white color. And so Linda brought me the box and said, "Do you want this?" Because they were just going to burn it. So I took it. It smelled really, really musty. And I thought, oh boy, I don't know if the smell is going to go away. Because sometimes that mildewy, musty smell just doesn't go away. So I literally let it sit, open box for a year, maybe longer, in our basement, which we have a dry basement. We don't really get the musty, mildewy smell down there. And so I let it sit down there. And then last summer, I wanted to try some natural dyeing. I thought, well, I'll try it on that yarn because I don't know, it just felt like yarn that if I messed it up, it wasn't a big deal. So I dyed some things with avocado. I dyed with what else? Walnuts. I dyed with black beans, and this was a result of the black bean dye. I actually did probably 8 skeins with black beans, and I just altered the color by altering the pH of the dye bath. But I remembered that I had this, and I'm knitting from stash the beginning of this year. So what I did is I got this color, which is more of a light greenish blue, and this, which is definitely more of a blue. And oops. So I held these two double. And the thing with this Handspun is it's very thick and thin. I don't know if you can see that, but it's an inconsistent Handspun, which is fine by me. And it's also very rustic. So it would be pretty itchy. It's okay to me, but I definitely wouldn't want a sweater out of it. I don't think I could tolerate that. But anyway, I thought, well, let's try some slippers with it. So I held 2 strands of this together because I wanted to give the color more of a variation. And this is what the result was. This pattern has a nice cable on the top of it. I don't know how well you can see that. Okay, let's get out of there. Okay, so I'm pleased with how the yarns kind of, just the color. I like how it worked with holding the two different colors together. And yeah, they're pretty. They're very warm. They're very warm. I don't even know what kind of sheep this wool is from. So it's a complete mystery to me. But these are very warm. They're very slippery though. That is the one thing. When I walk, part of our house, we have laminated flooring down. And when I walk through that section of the house, I have to be really careful. So my husband said to buy puffy paint. When my kids were little, I would take puffy paint and put like little dots on the bottom of their socks to prevent them from slipping. But I don't know if I want to do that to my wool slippers. And I know you can buy those leather pads to sew on the bottom. I've seen those on Etsy. In fact, I think I've saved some in my favorites. But we'll see, because I'm not, in case you didn't watch my episode last time, I'm on a yarn and everything else spending freeze. So I'm only using the patterns and the yarn that I already have, that I've already purchased, already own. So I'm not going to go buy leather pads for these. So I'll wear them for a while and see what I think. But yeah, that was a really nice knit. These would make good gifts. I did knit the smallest size, even though my foot, so I wear a size 7.5, 8 US in my shoe. So I should have, per pattern, I should have knitted the medium size, but my feet are really thin and skinny. So I was nervous about them being too big on my feet. I'm sorry, you guys can probably hear the doors. My kids are in and out. They're doing their outside chores. Anyway, so, but they stretch, and so they actually fit me perfectly. But I was slightly nervous, and I thought, well, if they don't fit, I'll give them to somebody that has a little bit smaller feet than me, and they can have them, but they work. So yes, those were my 2 finished objects for this week. But I got lots of works in progress. So when we were outside this past weekend, we went out just to walk in the snow, and we went down. Our property is surrounded by pasture and woods. So we went down into the woods just for a walk, because it's really pretty to walk in the woods and when it's very snowy. And the snow was stuck to the sides of the trees, and it just was really pretty. And it wasn't windy down in there. The woods, like we have our house and the pasture behind us, and then it kind of slopes, and then when you go into the woods, it's like a drop off. So there is an old pipeline that was put in years ago. It's a really steep pipeline. So we went down that, and then there's a valley in the woods. And it was just nice. It was my husband and our 15-year-old son and our dog. We went down. My daughter was out sled riding, and my oldest son, he doesn't live at home anymore, so I'm not sure what he was doing. But Ian, my 15-year-old, was covered in snow, and his neck was sticking out, and I realized that it had been years since I had made him some sort of knitted neckwear. And he actually will wear my knitted stuff that I make him. Not socks though, and neither of my, none of the guys in my family will wear a sweater, so I will not be making sweaters for any of the guys in my family. But he'll wear like gloves and scarves and stuff. So I realized that he didn't have anything for his neck, and his neck was exposed, and I mean, he's a 15-year-old boy, so it's not like he really cared. But I said, do you want me to knit you a neck gaiter? And he said, sure. So I came in, I grabbed some yarn. I knew exactly what yarn I wanted to use. It was some that I had left over from a previous project, and I cast it on. I don't even have the pattern printed. It was a free pattern on Ravelry. It's called the Snowy Day Neck Gaiter. I will link it down below, and it's to be knit with like a worsted weight yarn. I'm using an Aran weight. What I'm using is Cascade Eco Plus. I don't have the ball band with me, but we don't need it. This is what I have so far. I think this is essentially, this would be called a broken rib stitch, I believe, because it's knit 2, purl 2 for a round, and then you knit around, and then you knit 2, purl 2, and knit around. So I think that's broken rib. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, so yes, Cascade Eco in like this dark charcoal heather on size 10 needles. And I'm just gonna keep going. I just want a neck gaiter or a cowl that will really squish up and keep his neck warm. So I wanted it to be a bit tighter around the neck as far as like the diameter or the circumference goes, I guess. And then I want it to be long so it scrunches and there's extra warmth. And I really love this yarn. I want to, when I break my yarn fast, I think I'm going to buy enough of this to make a sweater. And I actually have been thinking about this since last year because there was a, I forget what sweater it is, but there was a sweater that uses an Aran weight yarn and I wanted to knit it and I thought this would be a good yarn for it. But I want to get it in like a natural cream or off-white color instead of the charcoal. But yeah, this is a really easy pattern. It's such a mindless knit, which is wonderful. When we were playing Ticket to Ride the other night, I was able to work on this and still pay attention to my game, which I like because when we play board games, I tend to get bored when it's not my turn. And I like to have easy knitting to work on while everyone else is taking their turn. Of course, not every game. You can't do that for every game, but this Ticket to Ride, you can. So I feel like I'm saying a lot today. I hope not. If I am, oh well. Okay. So this will be done soon. Maybe today. Maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I'm having my parents up for dinner tonight, so I'm not going to have a ton of time, and I'm trying to film this quickly this morning before we get started in our schoolwork. So I don't know that I'll have enough time to finish this today, but it'll be soon, and I want him to be able to have it we have a lot of snow, and it's cold out, so yeah. I am liking this, and I'm loving this yarn. Absolutely loving it. And it's non-superwash, so I know it's going to hold up really well. My next work in progress is another cowl. I feel like I just want to knit a bunch of cowls, and I just like to have a cowl because you kind of put it on your neck, it keeps it warm, but yet it's out of the way, where like a shawl, and I'll share about this shawl a little later, but when you have a shawl, you've got these ends that dangle and they get, when you're washing dishes or making dinner, you have to be careful that they're, not falling into the food or into the wash water. And so I love shawls, but I find cowls to be a bit more practical on most days here at home. So this particular cowl I'm knitting is with the yarn from Lydia's Flock that I won in the giveaway that Jessica and Kateni had hosted for the Weekender Knit Along. And I just posted about this yarn last week, and I've already cast it on with it. I found this pattern for free, and I think it's really beautiful. It's called the Weatherby Cabled Cowl with Drawstring. So here's the picture of it. Isn't that pretty? And then it's got, on the drawstrings, it's got these little leather tabs to keep the drawstring from pulling the whole way through. I don't have anything like that right now in my possession, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm either going to knot off the drawstrings, or I'm going to put toggle buttons on them. I have to see how that'll look. I actually have quite a few vintage toggle buttons that I've picked up at the thrift store over the years. So I may do that. I like the leather tabs, but like I said, I'm trying to make everything from what I already own. So I want to make sure I stick to that. So that is what I'm making with this yarn. And this is the one ball. I'm almost through the other ball. And actually, I'm kind of hoping this pattern calls for, let me see, 480 yards, and I'm only working with 400. So it may end up that I have to take the drawstring out totally, which I would be fine with. So let me show you what I have. This is waste yarn. This is a provisional cast on that you do with this cowl, because basically what you do is you knit your cables. So you're knitting this way. And you're doing, it's like a 3 cable repeat across. And then once you have this long enough, you're going to join this end over here with this end. So it's going to make a really tall cowl that's going to be nice and scrunchy on your neck. And I like that. Just with what I'm doing with Ian's, I want it, like, that appeals to me, to have a nice scrunchy cowl that's tighter and warm on your neck. I think this is perfect. This yarn is perfect for this pattern, I think. And I am just amazed at how soft this yarn is. I am absolutely loving working with it. It is a beautiful yarn. It's a beautiful color. This is going to be a really nice neutral piece to have in my accessory repertoire. And I'm enjoying doing these cables as well. There's larger cables and then there's smaller ones in between. The only thing I would like to do, every time I knit cables, I think I need to learn how to knit cables without using a cable needle, just because I feel like that slows the process down. It's more fiddly because you're working with that cable needle, and I just take it out and pop it in my mouth until I get to the next cable. You know, I don't know. It's just one extra thing to have to keep track of. So I would really like to learn how to knit cables without using a cable needle, and I'm going to do that. But right now I'm okay, because you actually don't even use a cable needle for the smaller cables, just for the larger ones. And that is, I think there's like 8 or 9 rows between the 2 big cables, so it's not really a big deal. Yes, so that is what I'm using, the Lydia's Flock yarn. Let me see. I don't know that I don't have the ball band in here. It must be downstairs. But if you want more information on that yarn, I will link it below. Plus, I talked about it a little more in my previous podcast, last week's podcast, and I had won that in a giveaway. So this is a really enjoyable knit. My third work in progress is a pair of socks, because I always have to have a pair of socks on my needles, and I finished my Hermione's Everyday Socks. So these socks are being made with a self-striping yarn and then 2 different mini skeins that I have from 2 different indie dyers. So let me show you what I have so far. These are really fun. I like striping yarn because it's like more addicting, because you just want to see what the next stripe's going to look like. So let me show you what I have. Okay. So this sock, the main yarn, the self-striping yarn, is this. I'm going to zoom so you can get the details. And I bought this off of a store on Etsy, which I will link below. This particular store has a lot of self-striping yarns, sock yarns, and I've purchased from him or her multiple times. So this is color 5650, and it's a 75% superwash wool and 25% polyamide. And then for the contrast cuff and then the toe, I'm using this yarn that I purchased off of Blackberry Ridge Yarns. This was part of her Christmas at the Burrow, I think is what it was called. That's a Harry Potter reference. So I'm using that for the cuff and the toe. And then this is blush from 6 and 7 fiber. That, of course, it's so hard to capture these blushy pink colors. It's that looks very taupey on the screen when I'm looking at it. But okay, yeah, that's not gonna happen. It's not gonna focus. It's not gonna give you the right color. Actually, everything looks, I look extremely pale today. Must be the lighting in here. So I am using that blush pink on the heel because that it's almost the same as this blush pink that runs through the pattern or through the stripes. So these are probably going to be for my daughter Lily, because when she saw how they were knitting up, she really, really liked the look of it. That is all contingent on whether or not they are too itchy for her. She is extremely sensitive to wool, even on her feet. I don't even understand it. I used to think that she was just being dramatic, but she really is very intolerant. So she can only wear like the softest of softest yarns. I think I just recently made a pair of socks out of lichen and lace, and she really liked those, and so I gave them to her because they didn't bother her at all. So I know that as long as lichen and lace doesn't change the base, and I don't remember what base it was a sock yarn, so it was wool and nylon, but as long as they don't change what they're using, I know she can wear socks knitted out of their yarn. So if she can tolerate this, which in the ball she thought it felt soft enough, but now that I'm knitting it up, she's thinking it's maybe a little itchy for her. If they don't work for her, I'm knitting them to fit my feet, and she is almost 13. She'll be 13 next month. So her feet are about a half a size smaller than mine. So I'm just knitting them to fit me. That way, if they don't fit her, or if they're too itchy for her, I'll just keep them for myself. So yes, that are those. And then, my last work in progress is a test knit that I'm doing for Lisa of Dual Valley Girl, and I will link her below. And honestly, I don't have much for this because this test knit, so I got the pattern yesterday, and I think it's due the 26th, which today's the 22nd, so I need to really work on these over the next couple of days. But as you can see, I don't have much done yet at all. But it's a mitten pattern, and it has a cable running up the front, and so it's worsted weight yarn, so I'm confident that I can get these done in time. So I'm not worried about it, but I just cast them on yesterday afternoon, and then Brad and we had to be somewhere last night, so I haven't had a chance to work on these, and it's still early morning here on Tuesday, so yeah, I'm not worried about it. I'll get them done. I'm using the Paton's Classic Wool Worsted, and this is in the Heath Heather colorway, which is a really pretty brown, taupey, almost with some undertones of pink in it, which I know you can't see on the camera. But this is good because I need a pair of mittens. I have mittens. I have gloves, but I want a pair of hand knit ones. So I was more than happy to test knit these for Lisa, and they're beautiful. When I saw her put up the test knit call, I was like, oh, I really love those. I love test knitting. My husband doesn't really understand it because he's like, why are they paying you? No. Well, what is the benefit? Well, first of all, you get the pattern, but second of all, it's just, I like to test knit for designers. I don't know. I like to look at the patterns and just, if you haven't test knitted before, basically what you're doing is you're checking for mistakes. You're checking the ease of the pattern as far as like how does this read to the knitter? Is it easy to understand? Are there things that don't make sense? Are there ways that certain techniques or steps could be explained in a more thorough or clearer way. That's basically what you're doing when you're test knitting. You're making sure the numbers all make sense. It's not tech editing. It's a step down from that for sure, but I enjoy test knitting, and I do it quite often anymore, to be completely honest. And sometimes I think I also like it because it pushes me to knit things, and it gives me a deadline, which I like deadlines. I function very well actually on deadlines. And so yeah, I like to test knit. But that is all I have for this one. But not to worry, because I will be working on these today and tomorrow. And I do not see why I could not get these done for the 26th, which I realize is only 4 days away. But like I said, they're mittens and they're worsted weight, so I'm not really worried about it. I told you I would tell you what my shawl is, and I think I've worn this on here before and talked about it, but it is my campsite shawl by Alicia Plumer, I think is how she pronounces her name. And it is in Shibui Knits. It's an alpaca blend that they had, and I don't know if they have this blend anymore, because it's been a long time since I got this yarn. But it's a really pretty shawl pattern. And it's also a very nice yarn. It has a wonderful drape. It's not stiff. It's just a really nice, warm, cuddly shawl. So I'll link that down below as well in case you're interested in looking at that pattern. And so just a little update on my knit from my stash. It's going very well. I am really enjoying it, and I don't know why I haven't always done this. I mean, I've always knitted from my stash, but I've also bought a lot too, and I talked about this last episode. When you're on Instagram and you see all the beautiful yarn and you see all the pretty patterns coming out, it's really hard to resist that. But what happened with me is, and probably what happens with a lot of knitters, is we just keep accumulating patterns and yarn, but we're so distracted by looking at the next thing that we're not actually doing. And so that's what I've identified with myself, at least. So when Brad and I put ourselves on this no spend little thing that we're doing for a few months, it's really been good for me to identify some things in my own life. And it's also been extremely good with just creative. I think maybe that's why I've casted on so many new projects. Maybe because I haven't been looking for more yarn or for a new pattern, but I've actually been using what I have. Maybe that's why I have so many cast-ons right now. That might be why I've been so productive in my knitting, because I have really, honestly, I have just felt like knitting. And of course I can only knit so much because I do homeschool my kids and I am a wife, and there's other things that are much more important that require my time. But I have to say, in my free time, I spend it knitting most of the time. So yes, try that. Maybe you want to try that. I had a couple people comment after on my last podcast that they felt like maybe I'll try knitting from stash and not buying any more yarn or patterns for a while. And it's really freeing, guys. It really is. I recommend it. I recommend trying it. Even if you say only for like a month or 2 months, I'm just gonna knit patterns I own and yarn I already have, and see what happens. I think I'm gonna go ahead and stop this now because it's getting later in the morning and I need to go make sure that my kids are on track with everything that they're supposed to be doing. And I'm glad I was able to get this episode in. I want to thank you guys for comments, and because I just really love to hear what you guys have to say after you watch my podcast. And thanks for watching. It really means a lot to me. And if you would like to subscribe, there is a subscribe button down below. And yeah, have a great day. Those of you that are in the South, I'm a little envious of you right now because it's so cold here. But I think I just need to learn to look at the weather here in a positive way. And sometimes I do better with that than other times. Last night when we came home and it was like 10:30 at night and I needed to go out and make sure that